Hello and welcome to the first ever Scotland Sorare YouTube video. Please be gentle, this is my first time doing any sort of statistical analysis or videos etc. on YouTube, so apologies if I get any pronunciations wrong or there's any sort of small errors in relation to some of the data. The statistical data around the players, correct up until yesterday. I appreciate there's maybe been a few small variations etc. The idea of this guide is really it's to help onboarders, new players, guys that basically just consider maybe starting the game, probably really realistically from the period April to August 2021. As you know, if you've been playing this game quite a long time, the guys that started the game last year, they're in a great position. They've got good players that they've managed to pick up at good prices. It's now become a little bit harder, and the idea is I'm looking basically to try and present some decent value within the MLS that will actually get people maybe playing and maybe starting to contest possibly the MLS prizes, but if not, you might be able to take your team and actually play it in the global and at least maybe perhaps hit the F thresholds. So without further ado, I'll crack on. The first thing I want to cover, free agents and retired players. The last thing you want to be doing as a new player, unless you're a collector of course, but if you're a player that's looking to put out a team, score points and contest the prizes, the last thing you want is free agents and retired players because they won't be scoring any points. The retired players, as you can see down the left hand side, you've got a goalkeeper such as Louis Robles who's retired. You've got Warren Creeville there who's pictured. Warren, you can see Sorare have updated the card, and alongside the did not play, there's a red X, and that basically means that he's not scoring in the game. Further right, you'll see that there's Alvin Jones. Alvin Jones has been freed, and he currently can't score in the game at the moment either until he reaches another club or plays for another club. Now, Sorare haven't updated that with the red X, so these free agents, some of them are showing with a red X, some of them aren't. Alan Wynne is a good example. There's lots of them up for sale, and he was released from his club, so there's a very good chance that he'll either maybe move league or step down from the up to scoring leagues. I've also tried to cover some loans out. There's quite a few players that are currently, again, they don't have the red X against them, and they've been loaned out to USL teams or some of the feeder clubs. Good examples of those, for example, would be Justin Haak and Trey Muse, the goalkeeper, just to name a few. Andre Rawls, he stepped down as well. So they're still appearing when you filter. And what I wouldn't like to see, obviously, is players that are trying to build a team to score points, picking up these guys and then realising that they can't score you any points at the moment. There are other examples of players that are out on loan that have been updated. So Daryl Dike, obviously an obvious one, and Brian Reynolds. They're out on loan and they are playing in different countries at the moment, but they have been updated. But they are on loan from some MLS clubs. So fingers crossed, you're welcome to screenshot this data, take notes, whatever you want. I'm not precious on it. It's to help people. But that's a few players that in my opinion, I would say that you probably want to try and avoid buying. Sayed Abdul Salam, for example, I think he was just released maybe 2 days ago. And there's Alex Butner, who has been released from the MLS, and then he's went over to Europe, and he's been released again for fitness issues. So again, just cards to avoid for if it's not for collecting and you're wanting to actually score. So the first thing I want to look at is players under 0.050 ETH. Now I know that ETH's gone up in value, over the last sort of week or so. But what I've probably tried to do is, realistically, this is a 0.2 ETH team effectively that you can put out. So you can make a variation, obviously, of your defenders, midfielders, and forwards, and your extra player can be any one of them. And I'm going to cover goalkeepers last, just because it's a real sticking point, and there's not much value there. So you'll see on the screen here, what I've looked at is the last year's data. So it's not the last full season and a half or It's the actual last full annual year's data that these players have played. So what I've done is each of the players have been ranked just so that you can kind of see the value there. So I'm open enough and honest enough to to tell you that I've got some of these players on my own side for playing. I'm not on an unlimited budget. I don't have lots and lots of money, so I'm trading my way up effectively from roughly a £500 start. I think the portfolio maybe is valued maybe a couple of K now. But again, it's just been through trading. So you've got players like Marcelo Silva, who comes out high ranked, 75 plus scores. So he's basically scored 75 or more over the last year on 3 occasions. You can also see though he's scored 55 or more on 5 occasions. That does include the 3 scores of 75 or more. So he's at Real Salt Lake. They don't have a game the opening weekend, but him and Donny Toya are both at the same club, and they both come out really, really well in the scoring. So if you're looking at it to contest the MLS competition or the Americas competition, it's going to be pretty tough, to be perfectly honest with you, if you're starting from scratch, maybe from, I'd say, February or March without throwing in thousands of pounds. But it's probably worth seeing. Some of these players will improve, some of them will decline, and there'll also be some young players that aren't on these lists that have been selected in the drafts, etc., that may come on and have a sparkling substitute appearance and then continue to improve. But the thing that I wanted to look at, obviously, was just where's the actual value on what's on the market at the moment. So, Marcelo Silva and Donny Toya, I think that's how you pronounce it, very consistent. I think they have scored, obviously, there are more scores in total than that, but I think 35 plus, the players really have to be scoring in that benchmark if you're even to looking at the global ETH rewards. So if you're looking to get more than 205 points by playing your team in the global rather than the Americas competition, then you need players that are, on average, if you've got a common keeper, you need players that are scoring around about that 40-50 points minimum each to try and hit the thresholds to get prizes. So Donny Toya, Marcelo Silva, Graham Zusi was actually, ironically, one of my very first purchases on Scotland Sorare, and then I realised that the MLS wasn't due to start for another 2 months, so I quickly bought and sold him, thankfully for a small profit. Graham Zusi, although he's ageing, and he's in his mid-30s now, I think he's 34 or 35, and he's at Sporting Kansas City, he still presents pretty decent value. He more often than not scores 35 plus when he does play. I think he's probably over the back line of the 4. He's probably the 5th defender, if I'm being honest. So he's an ideal selection potentially if you're on a real budget. So yeah, we've got some good information there that hopefully can help you guys in relation to picking up some pretty decent players. Justin Morrow, I believe, scored for Toronto, which would have been overnight for me, but during the day yesterday. So Justin Morrow scored 1 and had quite a good game yesterday. So yeah, there's a few options that might improve. I'll move down to the even tighter budget. I've put some price estimates there, and what I tried to do is, these prices were roughly as of yesterday. That's the price that you could realistically pay for it. So for example, Zusi, if you're seeing a card listed at 0.04, with all due respect to the seller that's trying to get that, because the value is only for what someone's A, willing to pay, and B, obviously if someone values their card at higher, they're probably not going to reduce to that price. But these are the prices roughly you should be looking at as a ballpark figure to pay. So if you're looking on 0.035 ETH or below, you've got Graham Zusi, Nick Depay, pretty consistent. They will play, not always as starters, but they'll play as subs, they'll come on as subs, they'll play when there's defenders out due to injuries or suspensions, etc. And Joseph Mora, he seems to be playing not just playing at the back, but he's also getting some game time in midfield, so he's maybe one to look out for. Personally, and amongst that, I've got Danny Wilson. Obviously, I'm being Scottish. It was a little bit of an easy pick for me to try and get him, shoehorn him into my squad, whether he plays or not over the course of the season or not. But Danny Wilson is a really good sort of centre-back ball player, good on the ball, but he does have injury problems. So that's a little bit of information on your defenders. Moving on to midfield, again, Real Salt Lake there with Michael Chang, obviously giving you a really good contribution there as the top 75 plus scorer. He's pretty consistent with the 55 pluses, and he's again more than 10 on the 35s. Darwin, I think it's Sheeran, you pronounce it, Darwin Sheeran or Serin. He's very consistent, 55 plus scores in over 10 games in the last year and 35 plus on 19. So every time he steps on the park, you're guaranteed a decent-ish score that will help on that budget. I think that's really good value. Shea Salinas, again, comes out pretty high, and you've got Jacory Hayes, who's on the market for, I think it's the equivalent of like £25, 002 or something like that at the moment. I think there's a fair bit of value with him and Elsinho. If you're just needing a backup player, or if you're trying to put in two teams on a budget, then these guys can, they can fill in the gaps while you either trade up or upgrade. All it takes as well is for one of them to have a really good game, and you might, you can maybe make some profit. Perry Kitchen, he was playing in Scotland for a short period of time as well. He was playing at Hearts, I think for a season, maybe about 2-3 seasons back, so a little bit of interest there in watching how he does. He's just moved club as well. So there's some decent ones to watch there, and I think all these, anyone that's listed presents, I would say, half decent value for the budget. If you go cheaper yet, 0.035eth, Jacory Hayes, Nick DeLeon and Elsinho are the only three players to have scored 75 plus. Again, you've got that same level of consistency at 55 plus and then 35 plus. I really genuinely don't think, other than if you're willing to take a punt or a little bit of a gamble on a player basically breaking through, or maybe finding their way back into the manager's plans, you've really got to be looking at those players if you're on a real budget. So again, Victor Aloa, and Jordi Delham, they both play a lot of games. They both start a lot of games. They're very defensive mids, so they're not attacking. Whereas Nick DeLeon, he's more of an attacking midfielder and can play out wide. Jacory Hayes, he's sort of box to box midfielder, etc. And Endo, again, is more attacking. But the defensive ones are a little bit harder to come by, and they maybe play more games, but they don't quite score as highly under Opta. So all those sideways and backways passes. But again, you've got some price estimates there, and at 0.02 to 25, Hayes, Delham, Alonso, there's not really an awful lot of risk there, and there's not an awful lot of risk for you losing value if you decide to opt for these cards. Another card that's just come to light, seems to have maybe found his way into manager Phil Neville's favour slightly. Jay Chapman, I noticed has been getting a little bit of game time. I picked him up. You'll get him for anything between 0.12 and maybe 0.16 at the moment. He won't start every game in the midfield, but he might be an impact substitute that maybe contributes to a few scores. So again, that's somebody that's cheap as chips and could be quite helpful. Strikers. So strikers, it's changed over the last couple of weeks. I've been monitoring the prices for weeks, and the players that have been available have become less and less. Only this morning, Dominic Badji actually returned. He was 0.07 yesterday, but he returned and he's been back under the 45 to 50 mark. Now, Dominic has had a lot of injuries, and he's missed a lot of football. However, he has come back into the price range. Tesho Akindele, to be honest with you, has probably just now moved out of the price range and is a little bit higher. So Orlando are blessed with a lot of options. Obviously, Alexander Pato's just signed there as well, and he will, I would think, no doubt lead that line. So much so that even players like Benji Michel has probably moved, further wide and maybe even into the midfield to accommodate. So, we've got some players there. Akindele will get game time. Patrick Mullins, he came on and scored again last night. The real shock for me, and where I find really good value, and I signed him myself a couple of months ago, not fully aware, Abu Danladi. Again, in and out of the team. Has had a few injuries as well, but he has scored 75 along with Badji on more than one occasion. He scored a couple of 55 pluses, but 9 35 pluses and 15 25 pluses, which I've included the 25 plus scores just to actually give some statistical data. You can see down at the bottom there are players that, for me personally, I just don't feel they're great value. You know, Elliot Collier does come on as a sub, etc., but he really does, you know, that's his appearances are pretty much all substitute. Adrian Perez, for the price in relation to guys like Dunladdie, maybe Schoenfeld, who's just moved clubs, and Ricketts, I'm not sure there's the same value in those players when you can get, you know, guys that are going to play more and score higher scores on a more regular basis. So yeah, I quite like the idea that some of these players should hopefully give half decent contributions for starting teams. Patrick Mullins is just, he hovers round about that 0.05th mark, and seems to, you know, still get plenty of game time, so he could be one to look at. And Marvin Loria at Portland seems to be, you know, he gets lots of substitute appearances. He's been involved the last couple of games, just over the last week. So yeah, he looks as though he's a player that might get, you know, he might get higher scores, and he, you know, he's pretty consistent with the 35 plus scores. If he could just maybe add to that, and maybe get a couple of goals from the wide positions, etc., he might, you know, increase in value. We've seen with Dyron Esprilla, who's got, you know, a little bit of game time, had a couple of good games, and he was sub 50 roughly, you know, 2 weeks ago, and, you know, a friend of mine this morning sold him for, you know, over 0.1 eth. So it just goes to show you some of these guys are worth picking up. Certainly if they're younger as well, you know, they've got more career time, whereas you've got players maybe perhaps like Tosin Ricketts, who, yeah, he gets game time, etc., but, you know, he's getting on in his career. Will he get any better, and will he post lots of high scores? I'm not fully convinced. So that's some striker info, and I haven't done the 0.035 and under because quite simply there's just not enough strikers. We'd all be buying Alan Wynne, which would be pretty pointless. Goalkeepers. So where did Clint Irwin go? Clint Irwin was in this category. I bought one, and there's been, you know, he's had quite a few appearances in the friendlies and in the pre-season, and there's maybe a chance that he might get a little bit more game time, and he's rocketed in price, so he's now out of the equation. The goalkeepers is a really tough ask. You ideally don't want to be buying, you know, a third or fourth choice keeper, and some of the clubs are running with 4 keepers, some of them are running with 3. You know, I've got some data here that, you know, you've got clubs like Dallas and Houston, New England and Seattle, who at the moment are all running with 3 keepers. Now, you ideally don't want the third choice keeper. If you can get a backup keeper, it's an option. There are the international tournaments where there are a couple of keepers. So Andre Blake comes to mind, for example, where, you know, players will go out. I checked on a few of the keepers. Marko Maric at Houston, he's not in the Croatia. He's not in the Croatia reckoning for the Euros at the moment of this summer, because I'd looked and thought maybe Michael Nelson might have stepped in, but he's just not in the squad for the internationals there. So, you know, it's trying to be smart, trying to be clever, trying to pick up guys that will get game time. Daniel Vega, out of all the keepers under 0.05, he kind of stands head and shoulders above everybody. I think he's just turned 36. He's the Earthquakes' arguable number 2. They've got Vega, and they've got Barsano, Matt Barsano as well. But I would say that Vega's probably ahead of him, given the fact that last season, or over the last calendar year, so certainly he's played 12 games, and, you know, he's done not bad in the scoring. The downside, he is 36. I don't know if he'll head back to Argentina or if he'll retire when he completes this contract. But at the price he's coming in at the moment, 0.03, is it a gamble? I think it's probably a gamble that's worth taking if you desperately need a goalkeeper and you don't have, for example, a common goalkeeper. The other keepers really there are only a few. Joe Bendick and Kyle Zobek, Dallas. They have had a little bit of game time. Alja, I think it's Avicic, you pronounce it. He is currently injured at the moment. He's got a groin injury. I think it's groin or hernia related, certainly. He got a couple of games last year. He's a bit younger, again, for Timbers. So there is an option that he might be a keeper that could progress. And you've got Zach McMath, who also played 5 games. So, there are keepers that played. Greg Ranjitsingh has just moved. He's just joined Philadelphia. He played 3 times for his previous club, and there was a press article that basically stated that the new manager of Philadelphia, obviously they're happy to have Greg on board because he provides a little bit of experience, etc., and that he would probably get an element of game time. However much that is, I genuinely don't know. I'm not going to say go out and buy Greg, but I think unfortunately he's also just moved out of the price category. I had a little look about 5 minutes before starting the video, and there were a few quite listed at about 0.07, etc. So he may come back down in price. He was only 0.035 about 2 weeks ago. So yeah, there's options there. Richard Sanchez, free agent. I don't know if he'll stay in the league. I've tried to look and find to see if there's any transfer rumours, etc. on him. Could be a second or a third backup keeper for a club. The problem in the MLS is that most of the clubs, other than pretty much New York Red Bulls, have got a clear first choice keeper. New York Red Bulls seem to have 3. I sadly have one of them in David Jensen, the Danish keeper, but they've also got Ryan Mira, and they've got the chap that's just arrived from Brazil on loan who's actually got the shirt at the moment. So there's 3 keepers that are arguably all 0.1eth or more, and none of the 3 of them are guaranteed. So there is a little bit of luck involved. What I've tried to do there is I've made it where there's a clear second choice. So Brad Knighton, Alec Can, Michael Nelson. I think it's hard to argue that those guys aren't second choice keepers. So any injuries, suspensions, etc., those guys will probably get maybe 1 or 2 games, hopefully over the course of the season. And then you've got your did not feature third or fourth. So these guys didn't feature at all last season. And that's like Matt Lampson, Bersano. You can see them listed there. Lampson and Bersano may seem a cheap option at 0.02, but if they've got absolutely no chance of getting a game, is it something that you really want to be looking at? So that's a little bit of data. You're all welcome to, as I say, use the data. The plan is, I'm not a pro YouTuber or anything like that. I've got lots of data on all the European leagues. I've been collecting data since 1993, 1994, where I've been involved in fantasy football leagues really extensively and running them, etc. Sort of prior to the digital ages, and former Footstock, Football Index, investor, and on boarder at the very start-up sort of beta stages. So I've been involved in those games. Thankfully, I've made a lot of profit and not been stung as badly as others recently. And my objective here is quite simply just to make quite a bit of money on Scotland Sorare on the account, and basically to try and to help other people not, I suppose, hit pitfalls and lose any money and enjoy the game. I've only been playing actively, although my account says December. I've only been playing actively for about 3 months. Really enjoy it. Love the aspect of collecting, but obviously love the aspect of the data analysis, which is something that I do a lot of in my own time, and I've done it for lots of sports on a sort of paid capacity and a professional capacity as well. So I'm going to probably post hopefully maybe once a week, maybe twice a week max, videos, etc. Any feedback, things that you found helpful, anything at all, just basically I'll take it on the chin, whether good or bad. I'm just basically looking just to share some data and information with you guys, and if you want to share it, whether it's retweet, whether on Facebook, Twitter, etc. I say I'm not precious on the information and the data. It's there for everybody to share. So thanks for listening, and thanks very much. Cheers.